and then and then and then if you wanted, I could drop by and share, a tech headline in there or whatever.
I mean, anyone can drop by and share whatever they want. So it's a casual chat room. We normally have some questions occasionally, just actually initially when there were more people, there were people from the medtech side who used to do a health and well-being on the Monday side of it. It used to be there, but because they dropped off, we kind of have just kind of done it for twice because the world is opening up, so people are not available anymore at 5 a.m.
Yeah, and then also this week, starting today, we meet. We meet twice a day, and this one is the 7 a.m. UK. And normally we also meet 4 p.m. UK, but now we're going to start meeting 3 p.m. UK this week. We're going to try out moving starting an hour earlier.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that.
Go ahead.
What's the thesis? Like, why move it up an hour?
Why move it up an hour? Because our friend Justin and David do a room at 1 p.m. UK, and they have a great audience there, and I hang out there, and then the room ends, and then there's an hour gap, and then that room, and we thought, well, let's put them together so that we can just go one to the other.
Top of the hour.
And the people on the West Coast that room is mainly meant for are waking up at, a lot of them wake up at 7 a.m., and we were starting it at 8 a.m., so we're going to try it at 7 a.m., see if that works for them.
Okay, let's do this. It's 301.
Yep.
Tyler, wouldn't
yes.
it be a nice feature to have the possibility to move a room to a new topic?
Yes. Well, people mention Johan thinks he's the first to think of that idea. Johan, people have been talking about that since 10 minutes after the first person who ever downloaded the
app. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah. And Twitter Space, it's so common that Twitter Spaces already enables that, and they haven't even really launched yet. And Clubhouse, for the first year, mentioned it in every town hall meeting. They recognize that question came up every week, and I'm not sure why they're not doing that for database reasons. I imagine. I'm not sure why. Maybe Carl has a guess from a technical standpoint if there's some difficulty that I'm not imagining. But yep. That would be fantastic. I think it would benefit all the rooms in Clubhouse if people could start editing the names of the room. Here's the problem. I think I figured out the problem. The problem is there's a lot of people, a lot of room creators who honestly don't really have a good content to make. They're just purely trying to make names of rooms that people will find attractive and come into. And so
clickbaity, you're saying.
Yes, what will happen is they will sit and test and rechange the name of the room every 2 minutes until they find one that people stick to, and then people will start coming in. And that's just a very incredibly lazy way of, trying to trick people into conversations.
It's not just that people would rotate the room name to make it look like a new room, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It does get a little messy. I can see why they don't do it. It's similar to why Twitter doesn't allow you to edit your tweet, because if you really want to stop,
that's more for accountability, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, you can delete it and then you can make a new one. And same with your room. Well, so it's a similar issue actually socially. It's not so much a technical issue. It's more of a social engineering issue. But you're right. Let's jump in. Hey, Pierre. Let's do some news because we're at the top of the hour. And welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a fantastic, lovely weekend. I was watching webcams around the world. That could be a show in its own. And it looked beautiful pretty much everywhere, especially up in the Nordics. Geez, man, the spring has arrived. And what a beautiful day Stockholm had yesterday. And I hope it was beautiful wherever you were. There's a whole bunch of beautiful headlines to jump into. Does anyone burning with one? I think Akil was burning with one. Which one were you burning with, Akil?
I was burning with the Twitter one, but I've got something more interesting here.
Okay.
AI mechanism claims to detect disinformation with 96% accuracy, even trace its source.
The AI detects misinformation. Yes?
Yep.
Okay. What's the source of that one?
So that's from Gadgets 360, but they pick up articles from somewhere else.
Yes.
So a team at MIT kind of built this thing. They started the project in 2014. And they were kind of scratching their heads on how to combat the disinformation and whatnot post the elections, and it seems that they have built a bunch of algorithms that kind of do that.
96% accuracy. Wow.
Yep.
I'm reading. I just found the article. Did you tweet it to the Tech News?
Yes.
Oh, you did.
Yeah.
So I need to find it from you. How long ago? Oh, here it is right now. Perfect. I'm retweeting your tweet. Okay, thank you. So for everyone who might be new, there is this room that we are talking in, which is fun and exciting, and I hope you love it. I'm sure you will. There's a second screen if you want to play on the second screen along with us, which is on Twitter, our Twitter account, where I tweet out every article we talk about. So we're going to talk about this article, AI mechanism claims to detect disinformation with 96% accuracy. And Akil found this article and tweeted it from his Twitter account. He included our Twitter account as part of his tweet, TNATW, short for Tech News Around the World. And now I've retweeted it to our very fast growing list. I think we're up to 1,500 followers now. We're adding about 100 a day. It's really fantastic. And now everyone can tweet in articles. If it's cool, we retweet it. And now it's this group co-creation effort where we're tweeting out the best stuff that people tweet in. And all you have to do, if you want us to see it and retweet it, is include our Twitter account, TNATW, just like Akil just did, which you will see if you go to our Twitter account. And you can click this article and all the topics we talk about, and people are retweeting it already. Retweeting it,
and chances are, if you comment on it, and you can't get on stage because you're driving or you're doing something.
Oh, that's genius.
We'll keep all of us here. We'll keep an eye on the comments and just zip your comments in, right? So you're actually in the conversation while you're driving or in the office or whatever, right?
Yep. If you're in the audience, if you're in the audience and you want to jump up on stage, you can do that too. But if for some reason you'd rather just comment on Twitter on the article that we're retweeting from Akil here. This is a great topic. 96% accuracy. That's blowing my mind. So it says a team attempted to better understand disinformation drives and tried to create a mechanism to detect such campaigns. At MIT, that's the school that could do something like this, a team at MIT's Lincoln Laboratory Artificial Intelligence Software Architectures and Algorithms Group. Holy Jesus, you couldn't think of a longer name for your group? My God. The Lincoln Laboratory's Artificial Intelligence Software Architecture and Algorithms Group. Say that 5 times fast. They attempt the LLAISAAG. Holy shit, that's a long name for a group. They attempted to better understand disinformation campaigns and also aimed to create a mechanism to detect them. The objective of the oh my God, these guys. The Reconnaissance of Influence Operations program was also to ensure the ones spreading the misinformation on social media platforms are identified. The teams published a paper earlier this year in the National Academy of Sciences and was honored with a top 100 award as well. The work of the project has began in 2014, and the team noticed increasing and unusual activity in social media data from accounts that had appeared to be pushing pro-Russian narratives. Wow. Wow. Steve Smith, a staff member at the lab and a member of the team, told MIT News that we are kind of scratching our heads. And indeed, there's a graphic where they go into all the misinformation and disinformation campaigns and try and figure out the source. And overwhelmingly, the number one sources are, Russian. And then they keep track of which of those sources have been suspended. And in the graphic, you'll see which ones have been suspended. RT America, from the Russian media outlet, has not been suspended, the Twitter account. And to be fair, there's a right-wingish American source as well. So these are not national, specific. But what a fantastic article here. I just want to see if there's another juicy quote here that we can pull out. It says, defending against disinformation is not only a matter of national security, but also about protecting democracy, they said. Very cool topic. about the using AI to find the sources of misinformation on social networks. And, well, what do you know, Joe? It turns out to be a whole lot of Russia. Edward Cow, one of the members of the research team, said that earlier, if people wanted to know who was more influential, they just looked at activity accounts. And what we found is that in many cases, this is not sufficient. It doesn't actually tell you the impact of the accounts on the social network, MIT News quoted Cow as saying. Cow developed a statistical approach which is now used to discover if social media account is spreading disinformation, as well as how much it causes the network as a whole to change and amplify the message. What an interest. Yeah, this is where the geeks really know what the fuck they're doing. They get into the data of how much impact a tweet has, not how much apparent influence that one account would seem to have by its followers. That's ultimately doesn't matter, the number of followers or whatnot. What matters is how eager its followers are to retweet its content, and that tells you how much actual impact it has downstream. So that's the essence of what they did, was they were calculating who has influence downstream. And that's different than, you have people with 1 million followers, but their followers don't retweet their stuff. You can think of some of the Kardashian sisters, for example. And then you've got some incredible thought leaders. Elon Musk has some pretty big influence on Twitter when he tweets stuff. Like, it gets a lot of retweets. Just as an example, that it isn't necessarily your follower count, and it's how the downstream effects of your followers and then their followers and then their followers, and how much influence you can spread, whether positive or negative. In this case, they're focusing on the sources of what's shaping these disinformation campaigns of negative fake news campaigns. And by the way,
and interactions with foreign media.
Yep. But
outlets, right?
Why is this so important? Well, this happens to be more timely than one might first assume, because we just had one of these come up last week, if you were with us last week, where some shady character was contacting YouTube bloggers in France and Germany, asking them to say that Pfizer has a higher mortality rate than other vaccines, and offering them to between 1,500 and 5,000 euros to say so to their followers on YouTube. And one of these people with 1 million YouTube followers went to the press and said, hey, this shadowy figure claims to be a PR agency from London. Do you guys ever heard of these people? And then the French intelligence officers got involved, and then they tracked it back to, what do you know, Joe, our friend Vladimir Putin. And that's why this article is so interesting. And it's interesting how the geeks are getting involved to help the intelligence community figure out some of the sources of these misinformation campaigns. Nice article.
Tyler, may I add a quick comment? Lincoln Lab is a Department of Defense laboratory focused on national security. It's not in Cambridge, it's in Lexington, Mass, and it's managed by MIT. Yes. I hate to be so fastidious.
No,
but I believe this is pretty
that's
brilliant
an important
brand.
Yeah,
so I think that explains some of their language.
Uh-huh.
It also demonstrates some really good marketing on MIT's behalf, because while they do manage it, it's not quite MIT.
I Googled the name of, well, by the way, it's not the Lincoln Lab we're talking about. It's the Lincoln Lab's AI software architecture and algorithm group, which might not necessarily be based in the same city as Lincoln Lab, by the way, because it's a group within the lab. And when I Google the name of the whole group, it comes up as MIT.edu. Artificial Intelligence Software Architecture and Algorithms main website is on MIT.edu's website. So it's I'll retweet. Matt, you know what I'll do is I'll include the link to the group, the Artificial Intelligence Software Architecture and Algorithms group, at the Lincoln Laboratory, and let's see. And their group website is totally branded MIT, et cetera, You're right. Their address is 244 Wood Street, Lexington, Massachusetts. But that's where the Lincoln Lab is. Yes, in Lexington.
So just an interesting tidbit.
That is correct.
Yeah. Sahin, by the way, that's a fantastic contribution, my friend. And
thank you. I was feeling guilty about being
no,
too.
Shaheen,
no.
that's exactly you're like a star on this.
That's
Honestly,
fantastic. Yeah.
So
Yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
going to tread really lightly as I make this comment.
Go ahead.
But over the weekend, the Ukrainian ambassador to Thailand died suddenly on Koh Lipe, which is an island in the south of Thailand. And so within the diplomatic community, there's some speculation in terms of, because apparently he was fine. He was vacationing with his son. He started, vomiting. He was 45 years old. So, young in my world. And then he died suddenly. And so I don't want to speculate too heavily, but, as I listen to what you're sharing now, that's what's top of my mind.
Who was this again?
The Ukrainian ambassador to Thailand.
Oh my Lord.
Ambassador Beshta. So, yeah. Again, I don't want to draw too many connections at this point because it's been less than 36 hours. But, I have several friends who are in the diplomatic corps, serve as various representatives, ambassadors to Thailand from different European countries. And so I share that to be, just as another data point.
Let's look into this for a second. Let's see if there's any fire with this smoke here. You're right. It's now being reported by all the top Thai publications on the ground.
Even India, Hindustan Times just wrote an article.
Okay. So the Ukrainian ambassador dies on Koh Lipe. And for those who don't know, Koh Lipe is a rather undeveloped island. It's quite, there's not a lot there, right?
Really remote. I mean, when I visited, I had to take a 5 a.m. flight from Bangkok so that I could get to the southernmost airport, take a tuk-tuk into the city so that I can take a van shuttle 2.5 hours to the port so that I could catch the last speedboat that left at 1 p.m. So it's really difficult.
It's hard to get in and out because of the limited number of boats going in and out. Yeah, I mean, that's how remote it is, and that's how infrequently people go there. It's a very undeveloped island, but very, very, very beautiful. Yeah. And so here's what's going on thus far, because this is today. This is within the past 24 hours. It's like 16 hours ago. The Royal Thai Police have reported that the Ukrainian ambassador to Thailand, Mr. Andriy Beshta, 45 years old, died on Koh Lipe Island in southern Thailand on Sunday morning. This is highly unusual. Royal Thai Police deputy spokesman said that Mr. Beshta and his 17-year-old son arrived on Koh Lipe Island on May 28th for a vacation and stayed at the Bunga Resort. And the ambassador's son told police his father went to bed at 11 p.m. Saturday, and on Sunday morning he began vomiting, then lost consciousness and died shortly afterwards. Ambassador Beshta's death was reported on Koh Lipe at 5:30 in the morning. The body of the Ukrainian ambassador was later taken from Koh Lipe. According to the police spokesman, investigators found no traces of the room being forced open or of the ambassador being attacked. Meanwhile, the governor said a preliminary autopsy is happening at the hospital. The mainland concluded he died of a heart attack. A swab test of coronavirus at the hospital was negative. We ruled out 100% that he died from corona. The body was taken out of the hospital. Ambassador Bush's government desired the return of his body to Ukraine as soon as possible. So, speculation over his death. Here's where it gets interesting. Although no suggestions of foul play in the ambassador's death have yet been made, a degree of speculation is inevitable given the long-standing and ongoing hostility between Russia and Ukraine. Former Ukraine politician Viktor Yushchenko was disfigured in 2004, dioxin poisoning linked to Russia. In 2018, the British government accused Russia of attempting murder and announced a series of punitive measures after the Novichok poisoning of former spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia at their home on the doorknob. Those of you who remember that one, with those two friendly Russian tourists who went out to the middle of nowhere to visit, just happened to walk past his house. Very amazing coincidence. Russia is also widely believed to be behind the Novichok poisoning of opposition leader Alexei Navalny. That's still ongoing. In 2014, Russia invaded and annexed Ukraine territory of Crimea. And so that's why when somebody dies in an unusual way like this, especially Ukrainian government folks, and by the way, this again, I don't want to, push, conspiracy theories, but it is this time of year. The tourists who are here in Thailand, I can tell you because I'm in a somewhat touristy area of Thailand, there's quite a bit of Russians that visit Thailand around.
Well, Tyler, you might want to play your X-Files theme song again. I just shared an article here.
Okay.
Microwave weapon concerns have spread to the Department of Homeland Security.
Oh boy.
Which is encouraging employees to report unexplained health incidents per a DHS memo that's been leaked.
Did you just tweet this to the Tech News Twitter account?
Yeah.
I'm looking. Here, Joaquin, right? Found it. Microwave. Oh, this is crazy. Oh, this is really crazy. Look at this, everybody. And by the way, Akil's tweet is already up to like 7, 8, or 9 retweets already. And this one that Joaquin just sent in is truly wild. This is the X-Files. We need something better than the X-Files music. Microwave weapon. Concerns of a microwave weapon. This is a new style of weapon, which was first reported in Havana, Cuba, by the way, by the newly reopened American Embassy, which I happen to be at the opening ceremony of the U.S. Embassy in Havana when it was being opened. And shortly thereafter, the new ambassadors to Cuba all started reporting very bizarre symptoms, including nausea. And they felt like they were being killed by something, using their own language, but they couldn't explain it. When searching their body for anything, they couldn't find anything. And it is firmly held belief, and it mentions it right here in this article, the Havana Syndrome, they're calling this, that this microwave weapon in Havana, you got to see this. It says, here's the headline. It says, microwave weapon concerns spread to Department of Homeland Security. Subheadline, a memo obtained reveals that CIA-bred fears of Havana Syndrome have reached the department that houses the ICE and the CBP. U.S. government suspicions about microwave weapon attacks have apparently spread to the Department of Homeland Security, the nation's largest federal law enforcement body encompassing agencies like Immigration and Customs Enforcement, as well as the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol Protection, according to an internal DHS memo obtained on Thursday. The DHS Deputy Undersecretary sent a memo to department personnel encouraging them to report unexplained health incidents to medical officials with DHS or to the State Department. The memo goes on to announce that the DHS is partnering with our interagency colleagues to ensure comprehensive public health protocols and blah, blah, blah. Now, what's interesting about this is, here's some of the interesting quotes here. The DHS memo describes the gamut of reported Havana Syndrome effects. Here they are. An intense, high-pitched, piercing sound following by unexplained specific medical symptoms, including hearing loss, dizziness, ringing in the ears, balance problems, fatigue, trouble concentrating, vision changes. Anyone experiencing those symptoms is encouraged to notify DHS, Workforce Health and Safety, and Chief Medical Officers, or etc. One of Havana Syndrome's most prominent skeptics, Sharon Weinberger, DC Bureau Chief for Yahoo News, has maintained that there are a myriad of other potential explanations for the symptoms and that no leading theory has been established in a peer-reviewed journal. Okay. But the point is that this first started, as I said, even before I read this article, that this first became a theory amongst the U.S. ambassadors who were stationed to the newly opened Havana Embassy in Cuba under Obama. And nearly immediately, they all started having these really bizarre symptoms, which is very strange indeed. And now the idea is that this is spreading beyond Havana. And they had to take rather immediate measures to remove those people and start putting in defenses. I imagine that the Havana Embassy has now been retrofitted to block these microwaves, making a Faraday cage out of the embassy, perhaps. And assumedly it stopped, or else we would still know about it, I imagine. But you're right. This is, former CIA officials who spoke with this outlet, The Intercept, broadly agreed on the existence of the Havana Syndrome, but not on its perpetrator, meaning it's not clear who's doing it. Because even in Havana, it's still assumed that it could be Russians, because if those who remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, that was essentially Russia. So the nuclear missiles that Cuba had were obviously not their own, and it was very obviously, very clearly Russians who were providing the nuclear missiles to Cuba at that time. Anyway, so and it's assumed that there's still Russian involvement there. So the article continues. It has been attributed in speculation to the Chinese, Russian, or Cuban governments, this microwave technology, which the symptoms described are broad. They converge on their neurological focus, often resembling the effects of simple head trauma, which includes nausea. Oh, yeah. So, very strange indeed.
Isn't this the plot of Batman Begins?
I don't remember Batman Begins myself, but that could be. But if you could tweet that, that would be interesting. And by the way, so Poppy just found an article, as she's renowned for doing fantastic work on this, the mystery of the immaculate concussion, from GQ. It's about a senior CIA official tasked with getting through tough on Russia, and then one night in Moscow, his life changed with a miraculous kind of concussion. And then she found another article about the Havana Syndrome, how a directed energy weapon may be injuring American intelligence operatives. And the genius behind it, of course, is that it leaves no traces of any kind. And why do we mention this? Because previously, the victims of Vladimir Putin have notably had, as Navalny just had in his plane when he had to land in Berlin, he was poisoned. And they found, the source of that poisoning, that isotope, which has consistently been tracked back to the Kremlin. Hardly a surprise if you know Navalny. And similarly to the former Russian intelligence officers based outside, out in the UK, who, if you follow these things even loosely, you start to see the pattern that this particular isotope is used by the Kremlin to kind of end that gentleman in the Ukraine, the leading politician in Ukraine, and now this person in the Ukraine. That isotope, by the way, is very tricky to test for. Here's where this gets interesting, because the gentleman in Koh Lipe, Thailand today, who died of very suspicious symptoms, is the Koh Lipe, or the hospital in Thailand, I can assure you, is not able to test for that Russian isotope. So his body needs to be sent back to the Ukraine where it can be, and then they can determine if he was poisoned by, our friends in Moscow. So we'll see if there's a future headline up on that. And it took time to see. Similarly, when anyone gets poisoned by that, very often hospitals are unable to detect it. That's kind of the sinister element of it. But these microwaves are truly impossible to gain any firm evidence that people are being manipulated by these microwaves. So that's what makes them so concerning.
Tyler, by isotope, do you mean a nerve agent? I read that it was actually a nerve agent that was responsible for the Alexei Navalny's poisoning.
Yes. Do you recall the name of it?
Novichok.
Novichok, right?
Novichok, yeah, Novichok.
It's a it's radioactive is the point I was trying to make. Yeah.
No, this is a chemical composition. The thing you approve is it was one of the presidents of one of the small former USSR states that were actually by that isotope. I don't remember the name of the isotope.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. So
could it be an isomer?
Johan would know
I don't remember.
Yeah.
It was polythium or something like that. I don't.
I was reading that it was either in his tea at the airport or in his underpants.
Okay.
Apparently, it was in his underpants. His lawyer was actually on Clubhouse. A friend of mine did a room with him about 2-3 months ago.
Okay. Poppy's sharing some other interesting headlines here from Vietnam, kind of keeping it in Southeast Asia for a second. I'm retweeting Poppy's tweet. Ho Chi Minh, Vietnam, where I have one of my dear friends happens to live, Lucas, from Stockholm. Some of you might know him, some of my Swedish friends on stage. Vietnam, just before I read this article, it says Ho Chi Minh, which, by the way, Ho Chi Minh City is an incredibly huge city. Most Americans aren't aware of just how big it is. It's, far bigger than Stockholm. In Ho Chi Minh City, I believe it's 10 million people, just for measure. I mean, most Americans have no idea. Like, it would be an incredibly large American city, one of the largest American cities, and it's a city they don't even know exists, Ho Chi Minh City. And so Ho Chi Minh City, and it's incredibly dense, by the way. Vietnam to test the entire city of Ho Chi Minh City because of this new COVID variant that we talked about on Friday when the news was breaking, that Vietnam has discovered a new variant which is remarkably contagious, or easy to catch, we should say, and they're saying it's a mix of the UK and the Indian variants, and it's the most contagious variant yet discovered, which makes it very concerning. And here's what makes it really concerning. Vietnam, 110 million people, essentially has had no COVID from the beginning. Essentially zero. They effectively won the COVID Olympics, right? And America very notably lost the COVID Olympics, handedly just got its ass destroyed in the COVID Olympics, right? We were supposed to have the Olympics 2 years ago. We did. It was called COVID, and we actually found out who won. And Vietnam won, all right? And America lost, and everyone in Europe lost tragically. Just embarrassingly, right? And very notably, Vietnam won, and Thailand got the silver. And there's a toss up between Taiwan and a few other Asian places who actually did quite remarkably well. And without going into all the reasons why, I just want to highlight the fact of just how amazingly well Vietnam did. They essentially didn't have it because they controlled it. They had little tiny waves of it that they stopped. So did Thailand, by the way. We had like 2 little waves. We killed them. Unlike other places where you got waves and you let them run out of control willy-nilly, we had our little waves, we took the correct measures, and we ended them. And then lately, in the last week or two, we've got these incredibly new, stronger variations. And unfortunately, because the vaccines were being created in the U.S. initially, the U.S. is now getting vaccinated, thank God, because I hate to wonder what would happen if these new, much more contagious variations make it back to Europe and the U.S. Holy shit, you guys would be fucked. Because if we were able to stop the previous ones and we're not able to stop these new ones, you guys would be toast. So,
and the unvaccinated population will be affected.
Yeah, so it's to be determined how this plays out, right? But my point is, this headline now says we discovered on Friday, and we shared while the news was breaking, that Vietnam had discovered this new variation they are very worried about. We are in Thailand as well. And now, just to show you how serious Vietnam is and why they won the gold medal of the COVID Olympics, Vietnam to test the entire city of Ho Chi Minh City, about 10 million people, amid new variation fears. Vietnam hopes to tackle the new COVID outbreak by testing the entire population of Ho Chi Minh City and introducing new social distancing measures. The efforts come in response to a new cluster linked to a religious mission. Vietnam has had relative success in controlling the virus, but cases have been rising over past weeks. Over the weekend, officials warned of a new, very dangerous hybrid variant discovered in the country. The government says the new variant combination combines features of the variants first identified in India and the UK and is easily transmissible by air. Overall, the country has registered over 7,000 infections and 47 deaths, which to them is a complete failure of 110 million people with 47 deaths. They are embarrassed, and they need to take immediate action and vaccinate test the entire city of 10 million people, just to give you an idea of how a functioning government works during a pandemic. So,
Tyler?
Yes.
Hey, it's MA. Good morning. I have a question because you stated something in there that had me curious. Where was the group coming back? You said they came from a religious mission?
Yeah, so I want to make sure I tweet this out so everyone can read with their own eye. Those who want to, I did tweet it from Poppy. Thank you, Poppy. The details of this. It's from the BBC. It says the latest outbreak in Ho Chi Minh City is centered around a Christian mission, which had seen at least 125 positive cases and accounts for most of the city's infections. Those living in the vicinity of the cluster have already been tested and are in lockdown. Officials now plan to test the rest of Ho Chi Minh City's 13 million people. Did I say 10? I'm sorry, it's 13 million people. That's only 3 more Stockholms. So, or 1 more Berlin. So again, it would be one of the U.S.'s largest cities with 13 million people. It would rank in the top 3. So at a testing rate of 100,000 people per day, the effort would take the authorities more than 4 months to complete. In addition to testing, officials are now announcing new social distancing measures across the city for 15 days starting today. Shops and restaurants are closed and religious activities have been suspended. And then the quote is, all events that gather more than 10 people in public are banned citywide, but the city is considering to lower the number of people to just 5 in any gathering. And by the way, I should mention, as good as Vietnam has been in stopping COVID previously, they never had home arrest. Neither did Thailand. We were never forced to stay at home. Just so you know. And essentially businesses were allowed to operate. You had to do takeout delivery for most restaurants. And there were a few businesses that did have to close, notably movie theaters and gyms. But and
Tyler, what about travel policy? Were
yes.
Vietnam, were they prohibiting outsiders from
Correct.
coming into Vietnam?
Not prohibiting. They were forcing quarantines for people who want to enter. Same as Bangkok. Bangkok, the most visited city on the planet by far, more than London, Paris, Tokyo, etc. Thailand's was very simple. They controlled the virus geographically. They removed it internally, and then they made anyone who arrived do a 14-day mandatory quarantine. And that's how. And then, by the way, a lot of the people who arrived did have it. And every day.
But Tyler,
yes,
even for Vietnam, they weren't letting people in unless you had a diplomatic passport.
You could have. I can't speak authoritatively on how Vietnam handled arrivals, but if it was, I can tell you exactly how Thailand handled the arrivals. Was everyone who arrived, and anyone could arrive, you had to do a 14-day, very firm quarantine, which was incredibly highly monitored, and you got tested every 3 days as part of that. And a lot of those people did have COVID, but that COVID didn't get into the cities because it only stayed in your hotel room.
Well, that's how it's done. That's how it's done.
Yeah.
And speak of that in the present tense, Tyler. So we went from 14-day quarantine to, I think, 7-day, and then the new wave hit. So we're back to 14 days. My friend who's EU ambassador to Thailand just returned from Europe, and he too had to complete 14 days. And in talking with a number of friends who've re-enter the country, it feels like solitary confinement. I mean, their meals are all but slid under their doors, for the first week, and then they could get an hour of interactivity a day. So it's pretty intense, still is.
And here's the weird thing. There's an island in Thailand called Phuket, and it was reported yesterday, and it's been rumored for a while. Phuket is going to open itself up to no quarantine starting July 1st, 1 month from now. 1 month from now, it's official. Phuket is going to be open, no quarantine, but under the following conditions. The person arriving must have been vaccinated and show proof of vaccination, must be tested, obviously will be tested upon arrival, and show prior to boarding that they have a negative test, and upon arrival be tested and have a negative test before they're let out of the airport, which is a safe zone in itself. And more interestingly, the people of Phuket had to opt in to agree that 70% of the population had to be vaccinated. So they're quickly vaccinating everybody on the island of Phuket because it's a tourist destination. It's a controllable destination. The arrivals, as I mentioned, must have been vaccinated, have proofs of vaccination, have proof of negative status, and they must stay on the island for at least 5 days. And now Koh Samui, one of the other big tourist islands, is replicating the same thing, and they expect to have the same thing where they are allowed to accept people in 1 month for people who are vaccinated. And that is going to be very interesting to watch And it's an unfortunate situation because those tourism islands, Koh Samui and Phuket, the two biggest tourism islands, are so been shut down because of the no tourism now for over a year, that many of the businesses are about to, they're on life support and about to permanently die, and unable to, resuscitate themselves unless they get people in quickly. And this is sort of the race, kind of cutting or walking the fine line here, getting a little, it's a little bit desperate, but they don't really have a choice. It's unfortunate.
Tyler, what role do you think that technology will play in the enforcement of those policies in Phuket and Koh Samui and other places, right? So the paper, vaccine certificates could be easily forged. Do you think that they'll be linked with passport entrances? I mean, I think that there has to be something robust that would involve a certain degree of technology to make sure that they're legitimate.
Yep, it's going to get tricky, and you're right. And Thailand is not strong on the technology front, like Korea and Taiwan and these other places are around contact tracing. Thailand does contact tracing the old-fashioned way, where all the Thai local people know where all the tourists are. Every person in the community has the chat app, and they take photos of people and say, it's they talk, and the locals know where the tourists are and what they're doing, and it's an old school system, very paper based, word of mouth based system that's going to be. I worry about what could happen.
I just PTR'd the numbers for Vietnam. So if you look, their baseline tends to be like around 10. Maybe they go up to like 50. They went up to like 100, maybe once or twice.
Yeah.
In the last 30 days, they went from a baseline of 10 cases per day to over 500.
Yeah, that's
just to give you an idea of how they're growing.
It just shows you how crazy this new variation is, and it shows you how they managed to control it previously, with the regular, traditional, good old fashioned COVID, and this new variation is just a whole other different beast. But
wait, did you say good old fashioned COVID?
Good old fashioned original recipe, like the old Coke classic.
The OG, the first variant.
The OG COVID.
The Wuhan was a variant too.
Oh, was it? I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, of course.
Tyler, I wanted to ask a question around the tourism in Thailand, especially Phuket.
Yeah.
Is Eastern Europe and Russian tourists a big portion of that?
Good question.
Because here in Tanzania, we saw a huge bump in tourism. As you know, Tanzania decided to ignore it last year, and we cost us our president. But we opened up Zanzibar, and we got a massive Russian influence that's actually altered the island tourist dynamics for probably forever. But I think part of the reason is that a lot of those tourists that would go to Thailand normally, Phuket, etc., were then lured into Zanzibar, and we even opened up direct flights from Moscow. Essentially, we had basically like 80% of the tourists in Zanzibar for the last year coming from Russia and other Eastern European countries. So I'm wondering if it is a big portion of the tourists that come to Thailand are Eastern European Russians.
Yeah. By the way, here's a little trivia for you. Phuket is the 9th most visited city on the planet. Bangkok, and this is Wikipedia. In 2019, Bangkok ranked first, surpassing Paris and London in MasterCard's list of global destination cities. With nearly 23 million visitors, Phuket, they ranked as 14th with 10 million visitors. And Pattaya as 15th globally with 10 million visitors. So three of the top 15 cities in the world are in Thailand. Bangkok number 1, Phuket number 14, Pattaya number 15. And by the way, Pattaya is Bangkok. So if you add those to Pattaya is just down the street from Bangkok. And if you add Bangkok and Pattaya together, then it's wildly, overwhelmingly by no one's even close. Paris is not even close. So it's that you get a sense for how difficult the challenge it is to deal with COVID for Thailand, despite the fact that it got the silver in the COVID Olympics. So,
and I would say, since 2016, the largest segment of Thai tourism has been a growing population of Chinese tourists from secondary and tertiary cities.
Correct.
And so, it was interesting because maybe 3, 4, 5 months into OG COVID, the Thai government announced that there would be a tourism bubble with China.
Right.
And, having friends with the tourism, having friends within and who work with the Tourism Authority of Thailand, I learned that that policy was never vetted with the Chinese government. And so the Chinese government said, no. We want to keep our tourists and our tourism yuan in China. And so they position Chinese southern cities as tourist destinations just to try to help revive those economies as well. But yes, so lots of European, Eastern European, and then Chinese, I would say.
So the Wikipedia page called Tourism in Thailand this is a stunningly beautiful chart where they rank every year since 2006 till 2019 the number of visitors from every country. And China ranks number one every year, followed by Malaysia, then India, then South Korea, then Laos, then Japan, then Russia, then the US. And for context, China last year had 11 million visitors. Russia had 1.5 million visitors. Russia was seventh. China was number one. But those numbers are growing in terms of growth of visitors projected into the future. It will continue to be more Russian and more Chinese as the Europeans say, yeah, no, thank you. We will start going to new places. They used to be Europeans. In fact, it really started out with the Swedes, who the Swedish king and the Thai king were very dear friends. And when I first started coming, it was a lot of Swedish restaurants, and and those are gone unless you go to my island, where they're trying to escape the Chinese and Russians. To be honest, if you ask the Nordic folks, why they are going to Koh Lanta, they're looking to find the old Thailand that they used to love 20 years ago when it was just the original Nordic backpackers, and now they're going to new places. And I think
exactly, and this is where Zanzibar has benefit. Well, it's really strange because Zanzibar is a beautiful island, and it's been accelerating, becoming more and more touristy. But COVID and the fact that we let tourists come in all of last year has accelerated these tourists that were going to a place like Phuket. And so now it's altered the dynamics dramatically. And it's not just Zanzibar, even safari industry, which is obviously a typically high-end endeavor, like very sort of old school British, tea under a tent and all that. That's changed. The tourists are coming wanting, where's my vodka, right? I even heard of one group requesting strippers in the middle of Serengeti. Where are the strippers? But yeah, and famously last year, Zanzibar ran out of alcohol officially for the first time. We had a boom, and nothing against the Russians, but they do drink a lot. And Zanzibar is a Muslim island, and so we're seeing also drug overdoses increase dramatically. And so we kind of have this, and so the fear now is that they've discovered Zanzibar, and maybe it will alter our tourism dynamic going forward. It's not necessarily a one-time only. Why would those Russians go back to Thailand again if they just discovered Zanzibar?
I'll tell. I mean, as somebody who owns a resort in Thailand, who knows all the other resort owners in the region, there's now an effort by the government to have a reshape the type of tourists who visit Thailand, to totally reshape the image of Thailand and no longer welcome the lower budget tourists. Thailand is now reshaping itself to be a more affluent visitor destination, and at post-COVID, because a lot of the cheaper backpacker places that were $5 a night, those have all died anyways. They don't want them. Thailand doesn't want them to come back. They want to make it a 4-star, 5-star destination for more affluent families, and they don't even want to welcome what they built their tourism base on, which was the backpackers. And they're telling people, no, we don't want backpackers. As a matter of fact, please show us your bank statement when you arrive at immigration. That's not a joke. And if you don't have
short term, Tyler, I think that's going to kill I think that's going to kill the GDP and then slowly bring it back up.
Correct, and they're very conscious of that. But they because there's actually what they've realized. This is what they say internally is those budget tourists actually, they don't spend a lot. And there has been reports in the publications here because of how important tourism is here. And there's been a lot of debate internally about these lower budget tourists actually end up costing money because of the amount of headache they make for the local police and the resources, etc. So they've realized that for each income bracket you go up, the amount that they spend when they're here goes up 5-10x. So somebody, that stays at a 4-star hotel spends 10 times more than somebody who stays at a 3-star hotel. Somebody who stays at a 5-star hotel spends 30 times more than somebody who stays at a 3-star hotel. So bang for dollar, you want to attract those people. And so that's the whole new plan for the Thailand Tourism Ministry.
Well, and to bring the tech aspect into it, particularly with the Chinese tourists, since the formation of ASEAN or the execution of the ASEAN Economic Community in 2017, 2015, I don't know, a few years ago, people who are first-time international travelers, originating in secondary and tertiary Chinese cities, they were part of these tour groups that were labeled zero-baht tours because they used WeChat Pay and Alipay to pay for everything while they were in Thailand. And so the money never circulated in the local economies. It all went back to their bank accounts, to their communities in China. And so even before COVID, there was this tension because these massive droves of people who had never been able to travel before for economic reasons suddenly had access because of the ASEAN Economic Community. And there was incentive from within China to keep the money within China. And so, certain islands had to be closed down because of the environmental impact, on the coral. And, it was just happening so much more quickly because of the unregulated growth, if you will, of that particular segment, and tied back to, Alipay and WeChat Pay. So it'll be really interesting because there was this codependent relationship that wasn't necessarily good for the environment nor the economy, but there still was a dependence on that tourist segment.
Yeah. More headlines popping in here. One that jumps out at me. The Google, just kind of changing topics kind of abruptly, sorry, because we enough.
Your sound for changing topics.
Yeah, I have it right here. Thank you, Akil. So on to more traditional tech stuff about Google here. There is now court documents detailing that Google is tracking users even when they don't want to be tracked geographically inside of your phone, your smartphone. And in the court documents detail Google's user location data collection efforts to make popular privacy settings harder to find. They're intentionally making the settings to turn off their ability to track you. They're intentionally trying to hide those, has now been revealed, and they've admitted it internally. And there's pressure on partners like LG and other handset manufacturers to do the same, to make it difficult for you to figure out how to turn off the tracking of you. That's now been revealed in Google documents, and these are essentially internal emails that have now been revealed. As Dave Weiner says on Twitter, and for those who don't know, Dave Weiner was a real pioneer in helping develop the internet as we know it in some sense. He developed RSS feed. Google continued collecting location data even when users turned off various location sharing settings, made popular privacy settings harder to find, and even pressured LG and other phone makers into hiding settings precisely because users liked those features. And I'm retweeting his tweet to businessinsider.com, and then someone named Alistair Barr, who's the editor and writer at Business Insider, says when Google tested versions of Android that made privacy settings easier to find, users took advantage of them and turned off the privacy, tracking, which is so funny. Which Google viewed as a problem. So then they went back and made it intentionally. They again hid those settings and made them harder to find so that users couldn't turn them off, because that's part of their business. Their ad model, similar to Facebook, is based on data and tracking. And Apple recently updated their operating system, the iOS, the operating system in your smartphone, your Apple iPhone, and they're now making it harder for Facebook and Google to track you. And
hard to believe their slogan used to be "Don't be evil."
Right.
Do no evil.
Yeah. Well, now they've removed that essentially, but it's.
What's funny about this is is Android 12 is meant to be adding these features. And so why should we trust them to that if you turn the privacy features on Android 12, you'll be able to not be tracked? It's bullshit, right?
Yeah. But it's both of these articles now I just retweeted, and it's interesting to see how the headlines, this is from The Verge and Gadgets and others, and the lack of some of the big journalists to even cover this. So from The Verge, it says the headline is Google reportedly made it difficult for smartphone users to find privacy settings. From Engadget, Google reportedly made it harder to find Android privacy settings. They all have nearly the identical, reportedly, not using
Tyler,
court documents.
Do you think it's because they reckon their scoops are going to be limited?
Correct. They clearly have a conflict of interest. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's why you're not even seeing the bigger tech publications even touching this. And when The Verge and Gadget and the few that are covering it, they are clearly distancing themselves from accusing Google of anything by saying Google reportedly made it harder. Well, there's court documents that show the internal emails. This isn't reportedly. Google did make it harder. There's actual proof. There's internal conversations of the employees saying, this is a problem. The users are no longer turning off their their tracking.
Tyler, this is a Star Wars one, right? Remember in Star Wars, these aren't the droids. These are not
exactly.
The droids you're looking for. Move along now, please. These are not the droids you're
nothing
looking
to see here. Let's just bury this news and move on because this is core to Google's business. I'm surprised Apple isn't taking a stronger position. It's probably because they are still slightly guilty themselves in some way they don't want to draw attention to themselves on this issue either, ultimately.
Since we're moving away from cookies as tracking, what's the new mechanism for tracking?
Flock. Google calls it Federation of Cohorts. And what that means is, and by the way, this is a complete disinformation campaign in itself, ultimately. And we need to get a real expert in here to really expose it, which is, and some have, and they've taken to Twitter to say exactly what I'm now going to tell you, which is Google saying, we've got this new system. It doesn't identify you personally. It puts you as part of a group of other, 35-year-old Irish guys in Dublin who may or may not drink too much on Friday night, and that's your group, right? It's called a cohort, and you are these are federations of cohorts, but we no longer have a unique identifier to Dave McGinty, right? But it turns out Google this is just a game, because Google, due to all of the Wi-Fi that they have, you've heard of Google Wi-Fi, due to they have 5 other ways to track you through Chrome browser, through the other Google apps on your phone, and they have 10 ways to Friday to know exactly who you are, even without using the traditional cookie. However, they do want to kill the cookie because now that limits Facebook's ability to track you. So they don't need the cookie anymore. They have so many other ways to track you. So they're now removing the way that their competitors track you because they have their own ways to track you, and looking magnanimous in the process of saying, hey, guess what, everybody? We're not going to use these evil cookies anymore. Aren't we the good guys? No. You're just killing off your competitors who are dependent on that cookie, because you've got other genius ways to track these individuals just as effectively, if not more so. So it's a bit of a head.
You had a certain amount of control over cookies locally. You're going to have less of that with Flock.
Right.
So for the individual user, you actually have less control now.
Right.
Can I add something to that, Tyler? This is Michelle speaking.
Yeah, go ahead, Michelle.
I just want to add that, Google actually worked with all their competitors across the industry to find alternative solutions.
Yes.
So, Apple hasn't really been showing the same collaborative behavior when they roll out iOS 14.5. Just wanted to add that. So Facebook found another solution, and it was approved by Google, and they've been working together. So,
and I imagine that will be mentioned in some sense in the upcoming event this week on Wednesday. Yeah, the F8.
It's already rolled out, but I think it hasn't been widely announced. But all the ad industry players or advertisers are moving towards that solution. It's technically sending data directly from server to server, and with consent, obviously, but it wasn't broadly spoken about.
Right. So today being Monday, and happy Monday, everybody, on Wednesday, it happens to be Facebook's biggest annual event of the year called F8. And it's a truly fantastic event where each year Mark Zuckerberg jumps up on stage, gives a keynote about what Facebook's been up to for the past year, what they're doing today, and where they, more interestingly, he always reveals where they're going. And he's has a great record of following up, Elon Musk often gets correctly accused of, not being accurate with his timelines and, daydreaming a bit and fantasizing a bit, and Zuck is a different beast. He says, here's what we're going to do. and they're already halfway to doing it. And they're just letting everyone know, here's where we're going for the next 12, 24 months. And so we're going to see what Facebook has in store for the next year or two on Wednesday when Mark Zuckerberg and other senior Facebook executives jump on stage and share as they do at this annual event. So please, we are going to have, by the way, that live stream event happens with this event at the same time. So we're going to be here doing the news until the live stream starts. We really hope Michelle joins us because Cal and I and everyone on stage really appreciate Michelle joining us each day to really give us important context around some of our conspiracy theories. And
brings us down to earth. She brings us down to earth sometimes, which is nice.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And it'll be particularly fantastic on Wednesday when we watch the keynote. And it's fun to see what Facebook has in store. And here's a couple of things we're expecting them to talk about. As we were just saying, the whole new ability around data around users and how that's used as part of their advertising network, which is their core business is, as one of the world's biggest digital advertising networks. You could say Google and Facebook are the two biggest ad networks. And so I imagine they'll touch on that. But that isn't really the star of the show by any stretch. I think the star of the show is going to be the future of social commerce, of empowering Facebook users and creators, more specifically, to monetize and match with brands and partners to monetize. And we know this because even Zuck said so on his own Facebook post a few days ago. And he doesn't post that often. So when he does, and when he's talking about that, I think that's a good indication of what's to come. And I imagine VR will be mentioned because Zuck is a huge fan of the VR platform. And each year for the past few years, this has come up. In fact, they even gave away a few years ago, every person in attendance in the audience, we're talking thousands of people, all got the Oculus headset under their seat that year. And that was the year I wasn't able to go, God damn it. So but this year is particularly interesting because 5 days after Facebook's event, which is just 2 days away, Apple has their big annual event, and it is known Apple is going to talk about VR at their event. And Facebook knows that. Mark Zuckerberg knows Apple 5 days after their event is going to be talking all about AR and VR in a huge, beautiful, shiny, $50 million Hollywood blockbuster way. And making a huge splash about this. So it's his opportunity to 5 days earlier kind of steal the show by potentially giving some exciting glimpses of what's to come in the Oculus platform, etc. And it'll be interesting to see. So we hope you join us for that.
Tyler, the interesting parallel thread that we've been talking about in this room for quite a while now is the social commerce. And I put up a tweet that Forbes did that was no surprise to you and the rest of the team, right, on Shopify. But I think it'll be really interesting to track the progress of Shopify as those two events land this week.
Less than 12 hours ago, a friend of mine was using TikTok and here in Thailand and showed me on TikTok the new social shopping in TikTok, where it's these people dancing in TikTok as they do, and now the clothes and this was a particularly celebrity dancing group, like a K-pop group, was doing a dance video in TikTok. And now the items in the video, the clothes, the shirts that the girls were wearing, it was like 5 girls dancing together in a K-pop group style. the shirts they were wearing were now clickable and purchasable. The skirts they were wearing were clickable and purchasable. The shoes they were wearing were all clickable and purchasable in real time without leaving TikTok. It was quite wild. Just to give you a glimpse as to what's
very
coming.
Cool.
Yeah, super cool. More headlines to share here. Faraz just sent one that I'm retweeting. Abu Dhabi invests $500 million in IVC Evidencia. What is Evidencia? IVC Evidencia for us. The largest veterinary care.
Largest veterinary care provider.
Interesting. Which now that medtech is exploding and becoming incredibly competitive, we just announced last week, not only Google and now Amazon is doubling down, and JP Morgan Chase is getting into the game. So medtech is already getting very competitive amongst the big players. And so now you're seeing more people picking other parts of the tree, like veterinary care, psychology, or what am I referring to? Mental health care and other niche aspects of healthcare are kind of the new low-hanging fruit there. And Faraz found a fantastic article, which is true. Thailand's major wealthiest family, the CP group, as they're called, and they control the fish industry, the chicken industry. They own all the Starbucks. They own all the 7-Elevens, which if you can't imagine how impactful the 7-Elevens are to the Thai economy, actually. Anyway, so Thailand's CP Foods closes poultry factory after coronavirus found the company's poultry processing plant will be shut down, and thank God they're doing that.
Faraz also shared this incredible article about the Lazada person stepping down. I don't know if you had a chance to look at that.
No. What is that one? Lazada, by the way, is the Amazon of Thailand. It's based out of Singapore. And until Thailand or Alibaba really come into Thailand, Lazada has done a fantastic job of becoming, in the short term, the Amazon of Thailand, where it works just like Amazon.
Faraz, do you want to read it? Faraz, you can read it well.
The Southeast Asia head of Alibaba, who was Lazada, stepped down. This is in relation to our earlier article talks, Tyler and Cal, around a whole bunch of major companies in Southeast Asia, specifically related to China, having major step downs of guys that have been with them for ages.
Poppy just found a great one from Ars Technica that we covered the SolarWinds hacking thing, how they got deep into the American government infrastructure, the Russian hackers, through the SolarWinds hacks. And the article today from Ars Technica says the SolarWinds hackers aren't back, because it was announced at the end of last week, that the SolarWinds hackers are back at it again, and they're deep into the American infrastructure yet again. And the article headline here says the SolarWinds hackers aren't back. They never went away. It says the new phishing campaign is less an escalation than a regression to the mean. The Russian hackers who breached SolarWinds IT management software to compromise a slew of U.S. government agencies and businesses are back in the limelight. Microsoft said on Thursday last week, and we talked about it here, that the same spy group, known as Nobelium, has built out an aggressive phishing campaign since January of this year and ramped it up significantly this week, targeting roughly 3,000 individuals and more than 150 organizations in 24 countries. The revelation caused a stir, highlighting, as it did, Russia's ongoing and inveterate digital espionage campaigns. But it should be no shock at all. Russia in general and the SolarWinds hackers in particular have continued to spy even after the U.S. imposed regulatory sanctions in April. And relative to SolarWinds, the phishing campaign seemed downright ordinary. And here's the quote: "I don't think it's an escalation. I think it's business as usual," says John Heltquist, Vice President of Intelligence Analysis at the security firm FireEye, which first discovered the SolarWinds intrusions. "I don't think they're deterred, and I don't think they're likely to be deterred." Which brings up the question, what the hell are we going to do about these goddamn Russian hackers causing headaches for the U.S. and not only the U.S. by any means?
Tyler, there's a little story behind the story there that's a triumph in rational thinking and news reporting, as far as I'm concerned. I've never heard a news headline or a news article in recent times use the term regression to the mean. And it just, in terms of smoothing out the ups and downs and all the excitement we get about things, and I've got bad backache, so I'm going to the doctor, and then my backache got better. That is a really important way of filtering what comes in, I think. And it's really interesting that, and it's just fascinating and wonderful to see a news article actually use that term. Anyway, just a side thing.
It is what it is. So here's.
Tyler, let me know when you want to move on to the next headline. I have a couple that I want you and Dan to look at.
Go ahead.
So there's because I know Dan's the climate expert over here, and there's I tweeted something out on sand giving water.
Yeah, I love this one. I'm curious about it. Sorry.
So I'd love to hear about what's going on there because I have no clue what it's talking about.
Oh, just state it. Sorry, I interrupted you. State it.
It's every drop counts. New breathable sand tech could help water-stressed economies. And the United Arab Emirates being the most water-stressed economy in the world. Decentralized rainwater harvesting could contribute towards flexible, resilient, and energy-efficient water supply infrastructure. Then there's CEO of Dake Fretsan, the company behind Breathable and technology which converts low-value desert aeolian sand into sustainable products. Water doesn't magically appear when we turn a tap. Behind the simple final interface lies a highly energy-intensive network. Water and electricity often come to our homes across hundreds and sometimes thousands of kilometers from where they're sourced and generated. And then this is essentially decentralized rainwater harvesting, which to me as a layman looks like the sand catches water and they're taking the water out of the sand. Is this what it is, Dan? Do you have any idea what this is?
That one I don't know about. There's
you're tagged on it.
The main thing is desalinization technology, and by the way, Israel exports desalinated water, which I think is just amazing. They're so efficient at it. There are also some cool technologies that have been around for a while, but people don't know about them, where you just take water right out of the air, out of the moisture out of the air. It's usually not high volumes. It's like drinking water you can get that way. And there are other techniques about getting, different ways to get it out of the air. I don't know the particular one, though, that you're talking about there.
Right. So this one's basically, what my understanding is, it's basically doing the same thing, but keeping water from sand in the desert in silos outside in the desert instead of transporting it directly and then desalinizing it. And this is apparently sand tech. And the article has been tweeted to the official tech news channel. Tyler, yourself, and Dan.
I'm looking for it. I'll find it.
I'll look for it too.
But yeah, it is.
You want to do eco news?
Yeah, go ahead, Dan. Yeah.
So I'll just say the headlines for 3, and then if anybody wants to hear more about it, we can talk about it. As banks shun coal, Vietnam emerges as an unlikely solar champion. I thought that was appropriate for what you were talking about recently about Vietnam, and it talks about, by the way, the kind of a mind-blowing thing, a 100-fold increase in solar in the last 2 years. How's that for an increase? That's pretty something. Okay, next headline. Big tech drawn to new Singapore carbon offset trading market. This is a SGX-backed platform in talks with Google, Microsoft, and Amazon. It's a platform for allowing big tech companies to buy a verified carbon offset so that they don't have to spend their own time checking each and every person that's offering a carbon offset. And by the way, there's different levels of carbon offset. The old ones like planting trees, which are pretty cheap and also not very effective, and the newer ones like actually sucking a ton of carbon out of the air and putting it underground. Those are much more expensive. So that's a market in Singapore taking off. That's kind of cool. And this is kind of exciting. No new coal plants in Indonesia in another bid to cut emissions. Indonesia won't approve any new coal-fired power plants as it steps up its effort to reduce carbon emissions. The government will only allow the completion of plants that are already under construction or have reached their financial close, etc. So-and-so said. This is the latest move by Indonesia, the world's top exporter of thermal coal. So they're reducing it locally. This is the same problem that Australia has. They're exporting their emissions.
Ben, just a quick interruption. While you guys are looking for it, there's another one. There's another one I sent you for Brazil, 91% water. Hang on. It says Brazil's worst water crisis in 91 years threatens power supplies. That's a Bloomberg article.
I just retweeted your water harvesting one for those who want to find it in the
Sandtech. I didn't think Sandtech would exist. It's just amazing.
I can get back later and what I think about it, but I can't do it like real time here without reading it. So,
yep.
Anyway, if anybody wants more about those three, but those are just kind of high level, kind of interesting things happening. Yep. There's also a lot being written about this Exxon, Chevron, and Shell things that happened a few days ago, where the court ruling and the two shareholder rulings that are really stirring things up in the oil industry in a good way. Right. So that's it for now. I'll take a look at this water thing.
There's a new headline today that Amazon devices will soon automatically share your internet with your neighbors. Amazon's experiment wireless mesh network turns users into guinea pigs is the headline. If you use Alexa, Echo, or any other Amazon device, you have only 10 days to opt out of an experiment that leaves your personal privacy and security hanging in the balance. On June 8th, the merchant, web host, and entertainment behemoth, Amazon, will automatically enroll devices in what's called Amazon Sidewalk. The new wireless mesh service will share a small slice of your internet bandwidth with nearby neighbors who don't have connectivity and help you to their bandwidth when you don't have a connection. It's digital socialism, apparently.
And by the way, I already opted out of that a while ago. But anyone who has a Comcast modem at your home, you're already doing that in a big way. That's what the Xfinity Wi-Fi that's everywhere. That's because everyone's home is unintentionally sharing their they actually say they don't actually take the bandwidth they're selling you, that they actually give you a little extra bandwidth, and that's what they're sharing. Yeah, but that same exact thing is happening with Comcast and Xfinity.
Yeah, there's a theme going on here, right, with Google and Amazon. For companies that like applaud customer testing and the customer is right, and we're going to do testing and A/B and blah blah blah, they're really just pushing features in their own interest. I'm just saying it straight from my perspective. Anyway,
the insidious part of this, though, is the fact that it's constantly opt out. Like we've had this with the whole Amazon thing with the Ring cameras as well, and sharing the data potentially in the US. And it's always opt out as opposed to opt in, which obviously works in their benefit. That's the intelligent thing to do from a marketing perspective. But it's the insidious part. And actually in the UK, Sky and BT also do this Wi-Fi sharing thing as well.
The weird part about the Ring was, and I say this because Jamie Siminoff, the CEO founder, I considered a very dear friend. We used to do Saturdays in his backyard barbecue for many months before he even founded Ring. Because he lived down the street from me in Santa Monica. He's actually in Pacific Palisades, but technically. Anyway, Ring was... It brings me no pleasure to say this about Jamie's company, Ring, but it was reported and revealed that they secretly... It's now been more... they've had to be very... engineer a different solution here, but they were sharing the camera data with police stations without anybody knowing. And then it was revealed that, in fact, the police stations are able to tap into everybody's Ring devices. And when journalists found out about this, they had to come up with, and they made it actually a feature that the users, got them, said, oh, we're going to let the police in your neighborhood have access to. This is a great thing, isn't it? And, kind of a head fake PR move. That apparently they now let you opt out of in some capacity, because they found out that when they positioned it as a feature and not a bug, that many people were happy to leave it on, or the majority were. So it's now become more conscious, but rather sinister that they were doing it prior to until journalists exposed it.
This highlights a really fundamental thing with IoT going forward. I'm a huge fan of messing around and putting chips into everything, but with your phone, you have the permissions. It pops up with an update and it says, hey, this would need this new permission. We don't have that with IoT yet. There's no mechanism in place to ask for that. It's just automatic. And this needs to change going forward.
But by the way, the sinister element of this camera sharing scheme with the police was this was a deal they did with the police stations in exchange for the police promoting Ring to their neighborhoods, saying this is a fantastic system you should all be using because it gave them access. That was the crazy bit. Susie, on
this ties in with a whole neighborhood fear thing as well, that in a lot of communities in the US.
Yeah,
that sort of
Tyler, did this happen? This is Lollet. Did this happen in US? You said
correct.
Interesting.
Hey, Tyler.
Yes.
I was reading up a little bit more about that. The technology regarding decentralized rainwater harvesting.
Okay.
So I wanted to read this for you if you were still interested, and I think I heard Cal say he was interested. So what it says is that tiles and curbstones manufactured using this technology by a company called Dake Reshsand results in hydrophobic surfaces, ensuring that every drop of precious precipitation can be directed toward reservoirs and harvested. Reservoirs built using the same material can store water, keeping it fresh for up to 7 years without chemicals and electricity-driven aeration. The second capability allows underground water storage beneath any public or private area, eliminating the need for land, especially allocated for reservoirs. So I guess the idea is that the technology is actually going to be built into the cities, and then all the rainwater is actually kept underground.
Yeah, so I read this too, but I think it's really just a press release. I mean, there's nothing. What it's saying is that instead of having large centralized reservoirs with long transmissions of the water to local cities, it's better to build lots of little reservoirs. Okay, that's great. Nothing super special about that, but that's a good thing to do. And then this particular company is selling hydrophobic, just means it holds water, right? I would say any plastic holds water, a lot of things hold water, and they just have this kind of building material they want you to build your water movement and water storage things out of. Go ahead.
If you allow me to speak just there. Zavia, which is a renowned publisher of news for the United Arab Emirates, doesn't publish these sorts of things. They publish it when it's been actually observed by the United Arab Emirates and has been approved or is being looked at specifically to be put in. And if you're aware of the United Arab Emirates, then you know that it's currently, with due respect to all nations, is currently at the leading cusp of technology in the world. So, with due respect to your experience, I think you need to do a little bit more research before making comments like this is just a press release. Thank you very much, and I'm done.
Okay, well, I'm not saying it's not something that's important. I mean, building distributed reservoirs is great. It just doesn't seem to be a brand new,
no, but kindly,
brand new technology that has not been.
I understand that, but
before.
why? If it was such a technology, then I'm sorry. You're the specialist on stage. I didn't see you talking about it.
I don't follow you there, but okay.
It's very clear what I'm saying. I'm speaking English.
Yes, I found something interesting.
There's lots of technologies I don't talk about, of course, and
you're always talking about problems. Why not give a solution?
Well, he's an investor, more of an investor than an entrepreneur, but yeah, well, he does share a fair bit of solutions here, solution news. This Amazon Wi-Fi sharing thing that I was discussing a minute ago, I found an interesting point here in this article. Kind of the golden nugget in this article is that by default, the Amazon devices include everything that they touch, which include Alexa, their Echo, and the Ring cameras, and outdoor lights and motion sensors, and even the tile trackers that they recently acquired will all enroll in this system. And since only a tiny fraction of people take the time to change the default settings, that means millions of people will be co-opted into the program, whether they know anything about it or not. The Amazon webpage linked above says Sidewalk is currently only available in the US, and I am sharing that from the Tech News Twitter account so that anyone can. Oh, actually, we already tweeted it. It was from Poppy, and I retweeted that, and I retweeted your article, Faraz, about the every drop counts of the new Sand Tech water stress solution. And you're right, we do definitely need to focus on solutions to very real problems, especially due to water is going to continue to be an ever bigger problem. So thank you for sharing that one.
My pleasure.
Yeah. What can somebody on stage have something to share? Maybe if we
I have something small.
Go ahead. Akhil jumped in first, and then who was after that?
Me, Ranjit.
Okay, Ranjit. So we'll go.
Let Ranjit go.
Okay, Ranjit. What do you got?
Thanks, Akhil. So I have some very interesting news about what's happening about Clubhouse in India.
Okay.
It's been almost a week, and during the weekend it was kind of quite crazy happening in Clubhouse, especially from the south part where I come from, near to Bangalore. So this state which I come from is hardly 30 million people, and interestingly, during the weekend, most of the politicians, film stars, media came online in Clubhouse, and there has been same topic but multiple rooms. The most interesting factor is that media channels, what they did was that they have a discussion, their usual 8 p.m. discussion in TV, and after that they were conducting an extended discussion in Clubhouse with thousands of people. And most of these rooms were like around 1,500 to 2,000 people at 12 o'clock in the night. And most of these rooms were in the local language, and the topics were, the titles, everything was in the local language. There has been some interesting discussions going on, topics related to films, politics, startups. I found one interesting group in which, I don't know, maybe they didn't understand about what is closed room and open room, how to trade drugs. That was one interesting room I found out in the local language. There has been one tech room in which they were discussing about, since there's a lockdown and all the schools are closed and it's online happening through Zoom, can we conduct these classes in Clubhouse? Because you can create a room for a class, about 50 kids, and can the teacher conduct this class in Clubhouse? There was a couple of prominent personalities told that they could get 25,000 followers in just one day. And most interestingly, by end of yesterday evening, by around 10 o'clock in the night, there was a lot of traffic problems in Clubhouse. I don't say that it is because India came online, but I don't know. Multiple people were complaining about that.
Is Miss Melania come on yet?
I haven't seen.
It's Malini, Tyler.
Yeah, if she comes on, tell her I'm here, and she can come in tech news, and that would be, she's a friend, so we'll talk about tech. She loves tech.
I have something super interesting.
Okay, but thank you for that update, Ranjit. It's curious to see what's going to happen with India here in Clubhouse, especially if people start making rooms that are anti-Modi. Oh my God, what would happen? Yeah, go ahead.
There has been a lot. There was one point in their town hall meeting they told about, which can be connected. Like they told about having this transcription text in the future, on the coming days, not in the future. They are working on it, so that is going to be interesting.
Thanks for that.
So, which means all the audio is going to be text soon. So, which also tells our conspiracy that are they storing the audio?
Well, it means also that the government can start looking for the word Modi and keywords that they want to filter for, and so that's where the text transcription can be a gateway to a problem. Yeah, what's up, Akhil?
We've got 19,500 languages. We'll beat them. But
it will also make the app
some
accessible.
Interesting news.
What's the news, Akhil?
Google-backed company is working on the next autonomous vehicles, airplanes.
Autonomous airplanes?
Yep.
Yeah, we call those drones. Yeah.
No,
it made him laugh.
Yeah.
Tyler, I do have some breaking news.
Okay, hold on, David. What's going on?
China just passed, well, it hasn't passed yet, but is going to announce very soon a 3-child policy.
Oh. Wow, that is breaking news. And this has not been reported by anyone yet, has it?
It has.
Oh.
I sent you the South China Morning Post article.
Okay, let me retweet it. 1 second. Let's find that. Where is that, David? Let's see here. So I can retweet it out to everybody. Here it is, South China Morning Post. China to introduce three-child policy to cope with aging population. Let's dig into this. China's to introduce three-child policy to cope with aging population decision announced after Communist Party meeting, supporting measures to be introduced to allow each couple to have 3 children. China will allow each couple to have 3 children in a major policy overhaul to address the challenges of its aging population. The decision was announced after a Communist Party Bureau meeting chaired by President Xi on Monday. I imagine if they don't get the results they're looking for, it might become mandatory or highly incentivized in the short term. That they
where's Leon?
Yes,
is the question.
Well, there's he's having kids at the moment. The
the breaking news we all need.
But David, I have a question. But infrastructure-wise, remember that recently you were announcing about the census, right? They are saying that the kids cannot go to the city with the parents who are working because they are not able to find schools because of the rule code, right? So is this also part of the change?
I don't think that will be part of the change quite yet, but they are making it slightly easier for children to get access to better schooling. So the current census data shows China is at 62% urbanized population and 38% non-urban. The goal is to eventually reach 75% urban population. So there is talk right now, especially in the conferences I've been invited to attend, to change the current economic structure, which is a binary structure in that if you live in a rural area, you can own land and you work as farmers, right, or tenant farmers. And then if you live in urban areas, you work in factories, companies, whatever, and you're not allowed to own the land that you live on. It's a 70-year usage policy. But they're trying to change the there's talks which I really can't share yet on how to restructure that in order to cope with the incoming urbanizing population.
Yep.
David, what about
Go ahead.
David? What about property tax? Any development in that area in China?
Property taxes for now are still sort of limited to different cities and provinces. So property taxes for the most part is still transactional, and so holding costs are very low. But it would not surprise me if there are going to be higher holding taxes coming out in cities like Beijing and Shanghai to curb some of the speculation, as these cities have 15 to 16% vacancy rates in a lot of the properties.
Tyler, I have a little news also from Japan related to population as well.
Okay.
More parents in Japan try matchmaking for adults kids as number of married increases. Okay, that's all for the headlines. But rest, yeah, you can imagine.
Well, how?
Tomoko, you have any comments? You're flashing like Mike.
It's an app, a special app for parents to use.
No, I think they are physically doing what the Chinese parents are doing, helping their kids to do matchmaking.
Yes, because younger kids, younger adults are yeah, they are still too shy to meet the opposite sex for the marriage or even for dating. So the parents are so worried about their kids, so they decided to matchmaking.
Yeah. I'm sure.
Okay, but
I'm sure Tyler, when you're here, you also go for a lot of Gokong, right?
Here's my question. So I have a very simple question. How are they matchmaking their kids?
Tyler, I can answer that in the China sense.
I know exactly how China does it. I'm asking in the Japanese context. Is it here's a question. Is it an app or not?
It's not exactly app as far as I know.
Okay. Are they meeting in Yoyogi Park on Sunday near the swap meet, and then everyone brings their kids? Or they bring photos of their kids?
Friends.
Okay, let me read this. In Japan, there's a practice called omiyai, where a man and a woman meet for the first time on the premise they may get married. Sometimes it is just the two of them, and sometimes their parents are there too. In recent years, however, there have been more proxy omiyai events where the parents meet without their children's present. So I guess it's a very similar approach as
that's the Chinese style, yeah. Well, desperate times call for desperate measures. Otherwise, you can have a robot child, and
can we get done with my news just for closure purposes?
What was it, Akil?
It was the Google-backed companies working on the next autonomous vehicles, airplanes, because they're doing some incredible stuff.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so this company apparently is not focused on autonomous flying, but they're focused at the automation of the gears and the control panel in the aircrafts. And these guys have done multiple autonomous missions on multiple types of aircrafts. And apparently they have announced the 55 aircraft partnership with Dynamic Aviation, the owner of the world's largest private King Air fleet.
And did you tweet this from the Twitter account?
Yep, I tweeted it out.
Okay, I'll find that and retweet that. Thank you for that one. Let's see if I can find that. We can't afford the Chinese. Yeah, and here's many people like Kuram and Poppy are sharing articles about the Chinese, kind of a follow-up to David's article about China couples allowed to have 3 children. This is very big news in China today, is it not, David? I imagine every publication is announcing this. It's kind of a huge...
Hotels are fully booked tonight.
Love hotel, you mean?
There's also a lot of, from my slightly probably dated context, but David, there's kind of a lot of nuance in here, right? So a lot of people do get away with, whatever the rules, the rules apply to some people in some ways in cities, and then wealth also plays a role here, and it's just, I used to always get the pushback from people in China and say, hey, we have one child policy, but hang on, it's, many people have 2 children or 3 children. So it's nuanced, right? Obviously.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I was going to ask, is there any link to the social credit score or any possible derived link?
Well, so at the height of the enforcement of the one-child policy, there was obviously no social credit score system yet. So there are actually regions in China where, because the cultural element runs so deep, that it's funny even for us when we go see these things. It's almost standard that people in the south of Fujian province and northern Guangdong province, that area. So these 2 provinces are connected, right? So that the areas where they're connected, that entire subset of culture, they just, A, they love sons, and then B, they just have big families. So having 4 children in that part of China, even at the height of the one-child policy, was not unusual. And for a lot of families in very labor-intensive parts of the country that really require farmhands, there's oftentimes a blind eye being turned towards the strict enforcement of the one-child policy. But for the most part, obviously, it has been, and again, this is not a value judgment when I say successful, but as a means of carrying out a policy, has been very successfully carried out. And because it's so successful, that's why China is having this massive aging population problem.
Which cohort of the population do you think they're targeting most, David?
In terms of keeping down to one-child policy?
The uptick to 3.
The uptick to no, so everyone is allowed to have 3 children now. So, sorry, I misunderstood the question, I think.
So, like, the read of it is there's a policy that goes out, but it's unequally implemented. But then there is those that it would be in China's interests to have an uptick in the people there, i.e. the country wants to act in its own interest for, I don't know, manufacturing stuff or more farmhands. So do you think that there's like a
a layer 2 under this, where there's going to be more direct incentivization?
Right.
Or do you think that...
You mean for particular subsets of people, right?
Yeah. Like when a man distributes goods, he rarely forgets himself.
I think the obviously the main focus will be urban population, because as the country's goal is to urbanize, that's certainly where the government wants to focus on, because part of the new economic plan that I've been sitting on in these conferences is they want to increase domestic consumerism, as they see that's the main driving force for the economy going forward. And to transition, hopefully slowly, out of this heavy dependence on export, as exports still account for 35% of China's current GDP.
What would be interesting to see is if there's an application process, and if China has the ability to track names and individuals and somehow combine this with some form of genetics to try and figure out what kind of population is going to arise. I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah, but at this point,
X-Files music in my head.
But at this point, they're not going to be picky. They're desperate for bodies, period. So once they get to a point where they can be picky and say, you should have children and you shouldn't, that's a luxury problem they don't have at the moment.
Well, I also think it's going to be tricky because I would imagine that most of the people who are of childbearing age grew up as only children. So, there's a certain psyche that goes along with that. And I can't imagine people that grew up as only children thinking, I can't wait to have three.
Lakeisha, you're
I think David is
right.
Their education and
David is the only child. I think
everything else that goes.
Lakeisha, you're totally right, and yes, I'm an only child, but my parents didn't have the one-child policy problem. Anyway, apart from my family,
so how many do you want, David?
Because there were exceptions, right? Like, sorry, 1 second. Because there are exceptions, right? Anyway, keep going.
How many can you afford, David?
Cal, I'm neither going to agree or deny or anything.
On the level of guanxi that you have, on the level of guanxi that you have,
and so, I think what part of the problem now that we see a lot in the urban rhetoric in China is most families in urban settings simply cannot afford to have more than one child because of how expensive it is now to live in urban centers. So part of the narrative that we're seeing right now is how the government can encourage urban population to have multiple children. The two-child policy came out in 2014 as a pilot and went into full swing in 2016. But even that hasn't been very effective. So Tyler is totally right that the government has sort of given up as to how to coordinate who should have multiple children, which subset. At this point, it's just pump out as many bodies as possible, so we're not going to face this deeply, deeply problematic population crisis issue, which by current figures that by 2025, China's 60 and over will reach over 20% of the population.
But David, is there any inbound interest in immigration? I mean, some countries have incredibly long waiting lists of people who would love to immigrate there. Does China have that luxury?
So this is the biggest irony. While Chinese citizens are dying to get foreign citizenship, not all of them, but a great number of them, the Chinese citizenship is probably the hardest thing to get. And I say this because I personally have staff who are going through the exact same thing, and we're dealing with immigration on this. So they're overseas Chinese, second-generation Chinese, many of them from the States. The parents have given up. The parents went to the States for graduate school. They've given up their Chinese citizenship. So when the children were born, they had U.S. citizenship by birth. But now that they're coming back to work in China and they're trying to gain Chinese citizenship, it's the hardest thing. It's nearly impossible. And the only thing that they can realistically hope to get is the effective Chinese version of a green card. So immigration, even for someone of Chinese descent whose parents are former Chinese nationals, is nearly impossible.
Well, let me add.
Can I ask a question?
Sorry.
Ladies
this
first.
is Joyanne.
Yeah, Joyanne.
I was just
welcome back.
gonna ask: the Chinese government gonna provide like any kind of
tax relief or support for individuals? Going on your point about how expensive it is to have multiple children.
They will know in about 2 months when they see the pregnancy rates, the birth. No doubt, this is, first of all, let's recognize, David, how many days ago was it when China announced the birth rate data, the birth rate decline data? It was about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, like at most a month ago when the census 2020 data came out.
2 weeks ago, China announced we have a declining birth rate. 2 weeks later, they have a new national policy to encourage children. You have to stop and admire a country of that size being able to move that fast. Okay, now you can also be assured they are watching the sales of pregnancy tests, and based on the number of pregnancy tests sold at every store in China, they can then make a calculation if they actually need to incentivize people to have kids with tax breaks or financial stimulus or pay to have kids, plans. If there's not enough birth test being sold in the 7-Elevens, then you'll see that in 2 months from now.
My thought. I can answer Joanne's question.
Okay, go ahead.
If I may.
Yes, Ben.
So Joanne, that's literally what I was going to add. This very perceptive question. China not only announced the 3-child policy, but it has what's called associated policy or incentives to push that particular policy. For instance, as we learned from the the data that we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, there are different birth rates amongst different provinces in the 30 provinces. For example, in Liaoning, Hubei, and some other states or provinces, there are additional incentives, as in extended maternity leave and additional birth, additional birth money, if you will.
Got it.
And then in another province called Shanxi,
we don't need the details. We don't need.
They will do.
We don't need to know which province is doing what. We got the point. Different provinces do different plans. That's great. So on the.
By the way, you got there's another story you guys missed it. Very related. This is CNN, I guess, last week.
Go ahead.
Divorces fall 70% in China after government orders couples to cool off. According to the number of divorces recorded in China has fallen more than 70% since the introduction of a mandatory cooling off period earlier this year. Anyway, there's more to it.
Due to COVID, I guess.
We get the idea.
No, it's a policy.
They stop divorces. You can't just get divorced. You have to have a cooling off period, and you just.
And they're doing that because of the declining. If people are divorcing, then they're not.
They want
kids.
It's all part of the same thing,
right?
But if you're in an unhappy marriage, even if they're not divorced, you're not going to have kids, Tyler.
Well, yeah. There's a more important social element to that, which is children born out of wedlock have difficulty obtaining a hukou, meaning they'll have difficulty getting into schools and enjoying social benefits. So that's the biggest problem with the wedding institution in China.
Just a quick one on the incentivization of those who've got the greatest intelligence. So, Ben, when the guys are getting money or better paternity, is it incentivized according to the IQ and the genes of the parents?
Who asked that question, Dave?
Yeah, that's
the short answer is no. Going back to Tyler, your question about immigration. Actually, China just started what's called the green card for Chinese citizens, former Chinese citizens.
Okay, we're going to move on because we lost 20% of the room since we started talking about China, so we're just going to move on. So the Virgin Hyperloop just released a video. If you've not seen Virgin Hyperloop, it's in the desert just north of Las Vegas. A long white metal tube sits at the base of the mountains, and it's it looks like a Disneyland ride. So I'm going to encourage folks who want to see what the future of transportation looks like. It's called Virgin Hyperloop. And basically they're working very hard. This is an Elon Musk project that's been years in the making. And they now have a functional test track near Las Vegas. And that this plan was to build from LA to Vegas because the government was going to spend ungodly amounts of money to build a high-speed train, which they have very difficulty doing. So Virgin Hyperloop is trying to do that for much less cost and much more efficient, much better rates. Speaking of China, they're also planning to send 3 people up to their new space station. So there'll be 3 less people in the hotels over the next month or so. But interesting that they're making progress on that. Rahman sent in some headlines about U.S. regulators signal bigger role in the cryptocurrencies market. Leverage says expert insight. So here the headline is that Wall Street. There's a bunch of Bitcoin headlines all happening simultaneously. Wall Street struggles to sell Washington on Bitcoin for the masses is the Publico.com, and I think this might be the best article today on the topic, which is essentially that Bitcoin is the biggest of the virtual assets, which, unlike the dollar, are distributed outside the government control and often operate on a decentralized basis. The strong push by Wall Street, like Fidelity, these huge banks basically are now on board with Bitcoin and crypto to some extent in a controlled capacity. And they're being pushed back by Washington, D.C. And that's the new battlefront for the future of crypto and Bitcoin is the banks are in the major financial industry players are in for it, and they're getting pushed back by the regulators. So it says, and I'll tweet this out in a second, a strong push by Wall Street to open up access to Bitcoin investment is meeting resistance from bipartisan group of lawmakers and regulators in Washington, setting up a lobbying fight over the future of crypto, of digital currency. Major financial industry players like Fidelity and Skybridge Capital are pressing the SEC to approve their plans to launch funds on public stock markets that would let small investors tap into the rise of Bitcoin. Wall Street says it's getting in the game and trying to launch so-called exchange-traded funds, ETFs, linked to cryptocurrency in response to surging demand, with the market for Bitcoin alone exceeding $670 billion. Firms are pouring money into lobbying to shape regulation to convince skeptical policymakers that digital currency is viable for wider adoption for the masses. And the key line in that sentence is, firms are pouring money into lobbying to shape regulations, which means our government's for sale and our laws are for sale. And now the banks are willing to pay. This is the interesting bit. Those who don't understand how American politics work, the question is, will the banks be willing to pay enough to Washington, D.C. money grabbers to get them to legalize Bitcoin? That's what you need to read between the lines there. Let me read it for you again. Wall Street now wants to get in on the game. They see a huge financial opportunity. So Wall Street firms are pouring money into lobbying to shape regulation and to convince skeptical policymakers. How do you convince skeptical policymakers with money? How's that work? Is it not based on logic and facts?
Lobbying.
No, it's based on lobbying, which is money, which means will Wall Street pay our politicians enough to make Bitcoin happen? Is Bitcoin that big of an opportunity for Wall Street that they would pay the government to make it happen? That's where we are now at in America. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Yes, go ahead.
It's not
There's
just
corruption.
Just one thing there. So of course, for Wall Street, it's a major thing, especially if they're able to do the ETFs the way that they want to do the ETFs, the way that they've been done in Canada, etc. And then the other thing is, sure, they're lobbying, etc. But there's also something going on where, for example, some of the banks are now being given the ability to offer USDC in interest-bearing accounts. So there's also some sort of fight back happening in terms of what usually, for example, crypto and non-specialized crypto investors would do. Someone who's just holding and has no idea what to do with it, they would usually have their bank or someone who's trading for them short a call to make them a particular interest rate. They're now offering USDC as the digital currency of the United States with interest on it. And that's also another piece that should probably be looked at.
Yeah,
there's probably a huge... Sorry, Tyler, go on.
No, go ahead, Carl.
I was just going to say there's probably a huge amount of fear-mongering here as well. Like they're going to these guys and they're saying, look, we go way back. You know me, I know you. We know how the game works. Better the devil you know than the devil you don't. Look at the power that Bitcoin has, that the whole, that, you know, and you can link the whole thing together. You can link Bitcoin with the meme economy, with GME, with AMC, and all of that thing. And you can say, look, do you really want the masses having this power? Do you want the masses having this decentralized finance with zero control over it, where they don't have to come to the banks, they don't have to use inflationary fiat? So it's not just the lobbying with the money. I imagine there's going to be a massive amount of fear-mongering saying, yeah, you know, we don't always get on, but at least you know us and we abide by regulations that you set.
The devil you know versus the one you don't, yeah? So
exactly.
One of the quotes from Senator Elizabeth Warren, one of the big folks on the left in the U.S., says our country needs to take a deeper dive on how to deal with cryptocurrency before any regulations are put in, which means my staff is willing to take your checks whenever you got them so that we can do this deep dive. Go ahead and send that check to elizabethwarren.com. And we will be happy to consider all of your points before we make regulations. Yeah,
this is funny because, like, you'll see on my Twitter Elizabeth Warren interviewing JP Morgan boss, and like gives him an absolute beating. You know, you were basically like profiting off COVID. You know, you're going to give that money back. You know, X bank, Y bank, you're going to give that money back. She was really kick-ass in the interview, but I think your point on politics and money and persuasion is just so well made. Carl used the word insidious earlier. I'm going to say it again. Insidious. Awesome word.
Yeah, but let's see how it shakes out. But it comes.
Tyler?
Yes, go ahead, May.
I was just going to make a comment because this is super fascinating. Because what you're seeing is less of the Bitcoin narrative that I'm listening to you say and more of the concern of what's happening with DeFi. And ING wrote a DeFi white paper 3 weeks ago in Holland, basically assessing the whole entire decentralized finance system. You know, the Dutch love to research. They love to write these papers. But it was a really well thought out paper. And I think, to Carl's point, and Dave's point, I'm kind of on their side as well. I think it's like going to a party and not having enough snacks or drink left over, and now everyone's showing up late, and now they're trying to deter people that have actually sort of been there for a while, and they're trying to fearmonger. They're trying to get people to sort of, you know, lose their shit and, you know, start not wanting to do it, you know. And the thing is that underneath it all, having watched The Big Short again, you will start to see that there's a massive narrative at play here. And the decentralized finance is actually where the derivatives market is going to go. So when you start to see the securest blockchain, yes, Bitcoin is, but it's for wealth management. It's not for currency usage day to day. When you start seeing the fintech world is entering into DeFi. So while everyone's messing around and paying attention to the things going on with Bitcoin, decentralized finance and all those projects are moving very swiftly ahead, and they're doing papers. They're, you know, it's in a lot of countries. You know, people could talk about regulation, which is already there. You know, everything's already starting to move towards decentralization. And I think, like, I think it was Carl said, the older, with all due respect, the white men in the financial Wall Street are getting nervous because it's been a big boys club and they've always had to like lobby and get all those elements. But now that's breaking up. And the challenge here is going forward for the future. How are we going to have a hand in crafting what it looks like? And do we dig our head in the sand as an ostrich? Or do we get on the court and start playing basketball with them? And I think right now there's a lot of people that want to get on the court and start playing because there's not been a lot of transparency in that space for decades now. And I'm going to call it now, Tyler. There will probably be another mortgage crisis coming down because they're doing something in the United States. You know where they're doing it now, Tyler?
No.
They're doing it with the millennials. They're giving those mortgages to millennials to buy homes. And they're approving their homes, which is where now you're going to see a whole nother animal happening of what happened in 2008.
If I could just add on to what Amay said, Tyler, just quickly, and I'll make it the last point, is I wouldn't be surprised if very soon you see banks doing the same thing in the United States with DeFi, because the derivatives play is the important play for banks. And that added to what happened pre-2008, and this comes back to an earlier discussion we had in this room where myself and I think it was Kieran who said that 2 years from today, you're probably going to be looking at a crisis much worse than what was seen in 2008, because now you've got traditional financial markets doing the same thing, and you've got alternative capital markets that were supposed to be a hedge or a store of value or something else doing the same exact thing by the same exact players. I'm done speaking.
Nalormi sent in an update on this story we started last week about China's emotion detection cameras that are being used on Uyghurs, and now that story is gaining more traction. Human rights advocates say they are shocked after the investigation revealed Chinese authorities are using Orwellian camera systems on Uyghurs, and more and deeper investigation is happening for over concern about that. So thank you for that update, Nalormi. I'll retweeting that one out. You can deep dive on that. And then also, I mean, it still needs to be more fully understood, and there's no doubt there will be a counterpoint raised and then objections raised, and it'll be interesting to explore those. And here's a really interesting point that David just tweeted 8 minutes ago from Reuters that I'm retweeting. The U.S., America, spied on Angela Merkel and other Europeans with the help of Denmark. The U.S. secret agencies spied on Merkel and other top officials in a partnership with Denmark's Foreign Intelligence Unit to spy on senior officials, including their neighbors in Sweden. Well, that's going to make summer parties between the Danes and the Swedes a lot of fun. So I just retweeted that one, so you can deep dive on that. Another one from Poppy back on the Russia front, all about the Arctics, which is becoming a super shaping up to become a future battleground of sorts between Russia and the U.S. and China and others for control of the Arctics, which is amazing. Is gone kind of uncontested up until 2021, but everyone's getting excited all simultaneously as the passageways start to open up due to global warming. It can greatly reduce shipping times across the globe by going through these new paths that didn't exist now that ice is opening up, and there's potential oil to be had. So the greedy fuckers are getting greedy as usual, and the moon and Mars will be next. You heard it here first.
I'm still back at hey Angela, wie geht's?
Yes.
The previous story, that's going to be some interesting small talk on the previous one, Tyler.
Florian shared a brilliantly worded article I'm retweeting. Is Southeast Asia ready for the U.S.-China tech decoupling? Some regional countries have sought to diversify, but this doesn't necessarily mean choosing sides. And this is a great point. As somebody here in Bangkok, in Thailand, like Lakeisha and myself, this is a huge issue coming down the road at us in Southeast Asia, because both China and America are very strongly trying to date Thailand. China wants to date Thailand for its food. America wants to date Thailand so it doesn't help China. And especially on the tech front, because India is banning Chinese tech, and so is Japan. But what about Southeast Asia? It's going to be very interesting to see if Thailand makes, because currently the Chinese apps are totally welcome here, and as we were talking about on the tourism earlier at the beginning of the hour, the biggest tourist group to Thailand is China. So I think you can make a safe assumption as to how this will play out, being that Thailand sells a lot of its food to China and a lot of its tourists come from China. I think we know which side Thailand will ultimately side with, but America's not going to let that go down without some heavy dating. But this article is really interesting that I just retweeted about recent developments suggest that both China and the U.S. are taking steps towards unraveling or decoupling their technology ecosystems. Nowhere has this been more evident than the semiconductor industry, which manufactures the chips. The impact of tech decoupling would not be trivial, and research published by the IMF, International Monetary Fund, showed potential GDP losses of up to 5% for key global economies. For Southeast Asia, a tech decoupling would largely be an unwelcome addition to existing issues sandwiching the region between China and the U.S., such as trade and territorial claims in the South China Sea. And that's, to put it lightly. So that's a fun deep dive if you want to peruse that one. Thank you for that one, Florian. And I'll pause to see if somebody has a headline that they want to share from their part of the world, economic, geographically, or professionally. Jump in if you got one. Or I got Shaquille just sent one about WhatsApp. You want to share this one? WhatsApp doesn't have red ticks to indicate about you should not pay attention to or forward such fake messages on WhatsApp. Akil, did Akil jump out? So I just
think he may have.
He might have. Okay. I just tweeted that one.
Faraz had an interesting one, Tyler.
What's that, Faraz?
Faraz, you pushed up one on the Irish government dissuading from crypto, which was quite interesting.
I was hoping you'd comment on that.
Yeah. So, like, it's sort of a copy and paste from what the Bank of England put out. Andrew Bailey, beware that you could lose it all. I mean, it's just a recapitulation from the Irish standpoint, but I just find it, a little bit boring that they got that. You read the article, it's basically like telling you off because you're thinking about crypto and doing the usual virtue signaling for stuff.
I think we have a crypto room coming up soon, but
I'll be quiet.
Yeah, that's right. But the Poppy found a great article here from Fortune. Germany is set to become the world's first major economy to legalize commercial use of fully autonomous robotaxis, beating out the U.S. and China. And there's a photo that you can see just by looking at the tweet. Thank you for this one, Poppy, of Angela Merkel stepping off of a robotaxi in Germany. I imagine the U.S. spies took this photo. But you take a look at it. It's a autonomous robotaxi in Germany, driving around Angela Merkel and her beautiful team. It's on track to be the first country to legalize fully autonomous robotaxis, beating out the U.S. and China. Good for Germany, although not necessarily good for Germans' taxi drivers, which have a very strong union, which were effective in stopping Uber from being able to enter Germany. So I'm curious why the robo-taxis are able to happen when Uber was not. Yes, go ahead.
Tyler, I think some states in the U.S. have already done that, so maybe not the country as a whole.
Right.
Also, I just tweeted to the tweet account this article about supercomputing and how that is also leading to partitioning of the internet.
I see it right here. Thank you for that. The U.S.-China supercomputing race. All over the world, HPC has burst into geopolitics, the government policy, and the partitioning of the internet. And that is a super hot topic this is where it gets really wild, folks, because China has its own internet. The West has a separate internet of sorts, and China might now someday soon force its internet onto Hong Kong. Why should we suspect this? Because there was an article yesterday that Hong Kong has each year celebrated the Tiananmen Square massacre anniversary, and last year it was live streamed, and it was very contentious because it was assumed that people they were told they can't do it, but a lot of people did it illegally on a big soccer field near the IFC Mall in Hong Kong, and this year, they're being told if you do it, it's like a 5-year prison sentence. So now that democracy is dead in Hong Kong, and they have now a 5-year prison sentence for celebrating something they've celebrated every year previously, it's now illegal to celebrate something. It'll be very interesting to see if they very soon have the Chinese internet now stretches over the border of Shenzhen and consume Hong Kong, in which case Hong Kongers who are able to use Facebook and Twitter and all the apps that are banned in China will wake up the next day and realize they are now part of the Great Firewall of China and all of their apps no longer work, etc. I would wager that happens within the next few months, and no doubt we will report it here when we do, and no doubt the Hong Kongers will not be able to tell us that it's happening because they will not be able to be on Clubhouse because it's part of the blocked apps in China, but not in Hong Kong. Cheryl, your microphone's blocked. Sorry, your mic.
David is in Beijing. Is joining us.
Yes, David, do you want to make a comment on the?
If there's a will, there's a way.
Yes.
So, Tyler, as you know, I actually roam in China with my Hong Kong phone in order to get on to Clubhouse, WhatsApp.
I do know this because I've chatted with him through a very interesting privacy app, and his phone number is a Hong Kong phone number, which I noted. Yeah.
Yeah. So, including my own company, what I have set up with China Unicom is I pay like $6,000 a month US to get a private connection to my family's data center in Hong Kong. And that's how I get access to all of these things. So this is obviously very concerning for us to not be able to gain access to foreign data, because so much of our business, especially in financial trading, completely depends upon news and access to the West. So I imagine that this will not be a complete shut-off in China. Again, much of the censorship is really for mass public domestic consumption in China. At the end of the day, there are too many vital businesses within the mainland that operates based on having the ability to connect with the rest of the world. I mean, for God's sakes, the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs is all on Twitter, right? So, I'm sure there is some, I want to say loophole, but some legal method, I guess you would say, for these businesses to remain, to continue operating in this space. So I'll keep you guys posted when I find out more.
Okay. On the China point, somebody did, South China Morning Post reached out to young couples to find out if they're going to take advantage of being able to have 3 kids now. And the report is China population millennial couples decry unaffordable childcare as fertility rates fall. A lack of affordable childcare, rising living costs, and grueling work hours are making many young Chinese think twice about having children. China will have to increase childcare support to boost its flagging birth rate and avoid a population crisis in coming years, experts and parents say. And that's in line with why the Nordics are very, very supportive of childcare and making it very affordable to have kids. Finland notably even pays people to have kids, $1,000 on delivery at the hospital, if I remember correctly. And any Finnish friends in the audience can give us an update on precisely that policy that they have there. And incredibly generous homestay policies in Sweden as well for mothers and fathers to make that an easy transition. And the companies everyone seems to be on the same page for the most part in understanding the situation, the bigger picture of all of that. But the Chinese young folks are saying that that's essentially the issue, is that the childcare really isn't there. And speaking of kind of a healthcare thing, we did cover at the end of last week, and it's still has some gas in the tank on this story about Best Buy Health launching their Live Smart for active aging community. People seem to really like this concept. We mentioned that big players are getting into the healthcare space in the U.S. because it's so tragically fucked up. I mean, America's healthcare system is just utterly tragically fucked, as evidenced by our showing in last place in the COVID Olympics. But Best Buy is also jumping headfirst into healthcare in a sense with their Lively Smart app, which I think is brilliant in targeting the aging community and the urgent care 24-hour service. It's truly brilliant. So I'm going to retweet that out just as a reminder to folks who might not have caught it the first time around. I think it's a brilliant example of how even retailers can innovate in healthcare and leveraging their existing assets and into new areas.
Tyler, I also tweeted on there, maybe I'll pull it out and retweet it again, on there, an article that showed a little bit of a history to that, right, on how Best Buy has built that capability. So it's got like the initiatives that it's been building up, leading to this. So I'll tweet that out, retweet it if it's not there.
Tyler, we haven't heard of your favorite TSMC.
Not today.
not today, but like I was shocked at the scale of it.
Yeah, I'll get to that in a second. But my actual real favorite is this article I just retweeted from Poppy, and she might not know it's my real favorite. It's called, my favorite is actually a company called Northvolt, which is approaching TSMC in scope and scale. And that's what the headline is all about. It happens to be founded by one of my dear friends named Peter, who he and his family stay with me here in Thailand, and I stay with him at his house when I visit Stockholm every month, as many people in the audience know. Peter's become a bit of a superstar in the Nordics for leaving Tesla as the chief product officer and starting a company called Northvolt to build the gigafactories in Europe for the German auto industry to become EVs, which is an incredibly important role. And you can understand how important Northvolt is because they have the technology and the know-how, being that he was the chief product officer at Tesla and head of supply chain, to start building gigafactories so that the Germans can figure out how to make EVs because they don't know how to make gigafactories themselves, which is why Tesla went into Berlin and why my friend Peter left Tesla to build gigafactories in Sweden for the Germans. Anyway, so the headline says technologies to slow climate change, meaning batteries, could give a 20% population growth to northern Sweden. What do they mean? Well, it says population could increase as much as 1/5 as 10,000 new workplaces will be created around Northvolt's new gigafactory. 10,000 new workplaces and a population increase of 1/5 around Northvolt's huge gigafactory facilities up in Huleftio. Construction work is in full swing at Northvolt in Huleftio, where large-scale battery production for EVs is set to start later this year when production reaches planned capacity. Some 6,000 employees will provide European car industry with lithium-ion battery cells by Northvolt, branded as the world's greenest with a minimal CO2 footprint. From Huleftio, a municipality of 73,000 inhabitants, 6,000 new workplaces is big. Oh, so it's not 6,000. Yeah, 6,000 new workplaces. Essentially, all of the suppliers to Northvolt also have to build factories around the Northvolt factory. They're essentially building a city in Huleftio, which we often joked about when over breakfast when Peter was, when we were daydreaming about just how big of an impact the Northvolt gigafactory was going to have on that small town in northern Sweden called Huleftio. And now the journalists, 4 years later, are writing the articles that we used to joke about at breakfast, which is Northvolt is, in fact, going to have a tremendous impact on this little sleepy town in northern Sweden by increasing the population by 20%. But congrats to Peter Carlson and the Carlson family, and his son Victor's birthday was yesterday. So congrats to my buddy Victor. So the other headline. So to your point, Dave, about TSMC, was there a new headline on that today?
Tyler, this is not TSMC, but fairly relevant and a bit of good news.
Okay.
I've invited someone who can come on Friday to your show immediately after my interview with him on my thing. And he is the regional manager for ASML in Asia. So I think he'll bring sort of very valuable insight to that entire supply chain for semiconductors.
Very awesome. Is he going to be on the show with you and David?
Me and David?
I'm sorry, you and Justin. I'm sorry.
Oh no, no, he'll be on my global news thing at 10 a.m. Beijing time.
Yeah.
So right after we finish up there, I'll bring him over here.
Fantastic. And let's end it there. That's a perfect point. So what we're doing is, David, as you know, is brilliant, right? And Justin and he do my favorite show on Clubhouse. Then they're now doing it every day. And you're doing it on a UK time. How do we translate that? Jesus. So quick calculation. What is that? 3 p.m.-ish? No, 2 p.m.?
3 a.m. for the UK at 10 a.m. my time, yeah.
Yeah. And so, and is it in your bio? Hopefully it is. Anyway, so their fantastic show, which is it, you're doing that for 2 hours? How long is it?
Yeah, so so this one I'm not doing with Justin because he's probably in bed already.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's my global news thing, and then I started this thing called Dim Sum Hour. So
that's right.
Yeah, so at 10 a.m. in Beijing, we'll do the interview with him and then bring him over afterwards.
Oh, very cool. Into this time zone.
Yes, so to this particular show.
Got it.
Your show is at 2 p.m. for me.
Right. So our other time zone, which you can see by clicking on the title of this room, where we will meet later today, normally we stop now and we meet 7 hours from now. However, we're going to meet 6 hours from now. We're moving it up 1 hour to join with Justin and David's other room that they do together around political news from the capitals, it's called, which I love. And you will see me there. And as soon as that show ends, this one will start, and we'll kind of just join forces. And I hope you all join us there, because it's fantastic political angles. And we touch on politics, as you hear here, but they really touch into it because that's their area, as you hear from David, and Justin even more so. So it's we're going to basically double up and link up. And then that's why we're going to move 1 hour earlier, so that we can take advantage of that fun transition. But I think it will also help our West Coast people who wake up at 7 a.m. It'll be an hour earlier for them, hour earlier for you as well. So please keep in mind, if you have been joining us, we'll be starting at an hour earlier. If you are in the UK, that means it will be 3 p.m. instead of 4 p.m. And if you're in Central European time, that means it will be 4 p.m. instead of 5 p.m. So we hope to see you then. And if you can join us beforehand in the room with David and Justin, please do. I think you will love it. And they could also use a good Nordic political expert. Hopefully Carl Bildt will eventually start joining that room. That would be fantastic. Because you have other fantastic folks that join you from all over the globe. And that's part of the fun of that room as well. All right, so there's a bunch of more headlines that I'll pause on that people are sharing to the Twitter account, and thank you to everyone who's doing it, and my apologies to everyone who had their hands up, to Vin and Devin and Ochan Mato and everybody. And it was mainly because we want to keep the gender balance kind of balanced on stage, and Vanch as well. But do join us again 6 hours from now, or at this time zone tomorrow, where there will no doubt be lots and lots of more tech headlines to go into. So we will see you then.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a wonderful rest of your Monday.